Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is, wherever you are right now. Thank you for tuning in to the Conversations with Dr. Don show. The show is produced and broadcast from Portland, Oregon, USA. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is we have decided to talk about. And this is the second hour of a 2-hour special where my guest, again, is Vern Turner. And we will repeat a little of what we talked about in the first hour. In case you didn't see the first hour of this show, you'll know a little of what happened in the first hour as we introduce the second hour. Are you still feeling as good as you felt when we first started?
I feel terrific. Let's go.
But I'm still nervous. No. But what I'll do is make something a little different this time. I always talk to my guests about who they are personally. And on rare occasion, I will talk about who I am personally because I do it now and then because I like talking about myself. I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, of red, white, and black Roman Catholic parentage on December 26, 1928. Today I am a-religious and accepting of all others. I'm a retired PhD clinical psychologist and present-day television broadcast journalist. I am the 12th of 12 children, am married, and am the father of 5 daughters by a first marriage. Politically, I am a progressive populist activist, still learning how to live lovingly, A few of my heroes include Jesus, Gandhi, MLK, and any other fellow human who is currently living lovingly. So there, now you heard it.
Perfect. Yeah.
So tell our viewers when and where you were born.
I was born in East Cleveland, Ohio in 1942.
Mm-hmm.
3 years, 3 months, and 3 weeks after Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point to start from. And did we talk about why you were born before?
Yeah, you asked me why I was born, and I frankly had to give some wise-ass answer that didn't make any sense. I don't know.
Want to try again?
Yeah, I did 74 years on a bet, I guess.
Anything significant about your cultural, national, racial heritage or your present American white bread?
No, I think I'm very typical of the Midwest Rust Belt community. Parents, my father's side was Canadian and German, and my mother's side was Ukrainian and Georgian, and that was sort of typical of everybody I grew up with and went to school with in Ohio.
Uh-huh. And you don't have a religious preference nowadays?
No, I do not. I'm not a religious person, but like you, I'm accepting of other people's beliefs. That's their business. I don't even go there.
Did you have a religious preference when you were younger?
Well, I was raised as a Protestant,
Mm-hmm.
but it just, organized religion and churches just stopped making sense to me when I went to college.
What's wrong with you?
A lot of things, I'm sure. But you're the clinical psychologist, so you tell me.
Not this time. I got a different hat on today. Okay, yeah. And say a few words about your formal education and other education that will illustrate to the viewers what you're about.
Okay. Well, I graduated from Ohio University in 1965 with a degree in biology, and I went into San Diego, and in 1974 I received my Master of Science degree in zoology, and taught human anatomy there, and ended up teaching human anatomy at the Wright State School of Medicine in Dayton, Ohio for a year. I was an industrial engineer for 22 years, in and amongst all those education breaks, and worked in a variety of industries, including aerospace and medical electronics, contact lenses, you name it. So
You've been all over the place.
I've done a lot of things. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Some people call that a failure in commitment, but I call it a sense of adventure.
How about other education? What comes to mind other than formal education? Anything comes to mind?
When I taught school, my students taught me a lot more than I probably taught them. There was, if you're a sage mentor of mine once told me that if you pay attention to your students, they'll tell you what they need you to teach them and what they can learn on their own. And so what that little simple homily did was make me pay attention to them. So I learned about them, which made me a better teacher of them. And so that was part of my book here, Worm in the Apple.
A worm in the apple. Here you go. You ready in there?
The inside story of public education, public schools.
We're going to be talking about that a little later on in this hour. Okay.
Certainly that, and you know, I had some great mentors in my industrial engineering career, and I had some good fellow teachers that I learned a lot from. My professors taught me how to be a teacher from San Diego State, and frankly, then it's up to me, and it's just a matter of will of committing to being a lifelong learner. So, you know, I have 3 books going right now, and I've always done that. So I'm always trying to learn something, and they're not science fiction or fiction fantasy or anything. They're pretty pithy volumes that I'm plowing through right now, and I'm always looking to learn more. That's what, you know, I think that's what you asked me earlier about why am I here, and I figured that it's my responsibility to decide that. And I've decided that I want to learn until they pull the sheet over my face.
You enjoy learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you enjoy teaching.
Absolutely.
How many years did you teach?
12. 13 in college. Well, let me take it back. I taught 2 years at San Diego State, 1 year at Wright State, and 12 years in public school, so that's 15.
There's any memory about something that happened during those years with a particular student or class that stands out in your mind that's worth sharing with the viewers?
Well, boy, there are so many. I was so lucky to have so many great kids. You know, it was difficult to accept the fact that you couldn't save them all. And there were kids who were destined to fail at life, and there wasn't anything you could do about it. All you had to do was ask them, and they would tell you, no, leave me alone. And you do leave them alone. But the ones there was this one girl in 7th grade who was struggling mightily, a sweet kid, just as sweet as she could be, tried and tried and tried, but she could not get the material and failed badly. And I had a talk with her, and tears were running down her face, and I'm on my knees in front of her just trying to, you know, soak up her pain as best I could. And so we went and we talked to her counselor, and then she was gone for a month. She came back a month later, and I come to find out that she had been diagnosed with a learning disability.
Oh my gosh.
And the doctors had the right meds for her, and suddenly she just blossomed. And then the school year was over. Well, about 3 years later, I'm teaching at a different high school, and I get this call from the office to come down. There's somebody who wants to see me. And I go down there, and it's her. And she just wanted to tell me that she had graduated from nursing school. And I was like, oh, man. Knocked me over with a feather. That just was too precious for words.
Thank you.
That's in my book, too. I have that and many other stories. So that was just one that came to my mind.
I could see in your eyes you were appreciating it, telling that story.
Yeah, it was a good story. She's a good kid, sweet as she can be.
Yeah. And in your retirement, you're doing a lot of traveling.
I've done some traveling, yeah. My wife and I both like to travel. She's done a lot of traveling before we met. Because, oh my, you can sneeze. She has been, she was a diver. She was a scuba diver. She's been to the Philippines and to the Sea of Cortez and Belize on her diving adventures. We went to Hawaii on our honeymoon, and she talked me into doing one of these hotel dives, so I got to have my dive, singular, of my lifetime. But yeah, we've been to the Galapagos Islands, we've been to Uganda, China, Great Britain, and this coming summer we're going to an Arctic cruise in northern Canada and Greenland.
They unfroze that Bering Strait so that you can get through, right?
Yeah, well, the Bering Strait's at the opposite end of the continent, yeah. But you're right. It's now Sarah Palin can just walk on water over to the Russia and shake hands with.
You're bad.
I am. I have to say that some of your colleagues have been coaching me. It's their fault.
Now, you mentioned Kilimanjaro.
Yeah.
I think of that movie many, many years ago with Gregory Peck.
The Snows of
Kilimanjaro, yeah. They made good movies in those times without special effects and crashing cars.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I've seen the movie. I'm not much of a Hemingway fan. I think he's pedestrian in a lot of ways. He tells good stories, but I just don't really care for his writing. The only book that I thought was worth reading was The Old Man and the Sea. I've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro in 1980, and I have photographs of glaciers that are 30 feet thick up there at 18,000 feet. Mm-hmm. And then I've seen recent photographs of Kilimanjaro, and those glaciers aren't there anymore.
Gone.
It's becoming a very barren cinder cone, which is heartbreaking, really, because of the majesty of that mountain. The highest mountain in Africa.
Yeah.
But it's all, and you were teasing me about going to the Arctic where there's no ice. And it's true that this year's ice withdrawal will be the greatest in recorded history, with more to follow. And they're already exploiting trans-Arctic shipping.
Yeah.
Because of that, which is going to screw up the wildlife in the Arctic Ocean beyond all repair. The sound of those diesel engines traversing the ocean is going to mess up the echolocation and the communication of the whales and seals and sea lions up there. It's another disaster that commerce is going to lay upon the earth.
So was this a matter of climate change that occurs naturally,
No.
or is it done by human interference?
Yeah. If you look at all the charts, and all the charts track CO2 emissions from the start of the Industrial Revolution, and the global temperature, they track perfectly. And when we really didn't start getting serious about screwing up the atmosphere until really World War II. And since then, you can see that the slope of those curves steepen dramatically and are steepening ever since. Remember, Don, when you and I were kids, there's only 130 million people in this country. When I went to geography class in 1953, my teacher told me that there were only 3 billion humans on Earth. In 2000, I taught my AP biology kids that there were 6 billion. And now we're pushing 8 billion humans. The population of the United States is more than double what we had when we were kids.
So the population increase is having that sort of an impact.
And everybody's got to have a car. The governments, the people of India and China have said that our economic revolution dictates that we shall enjoy what the Western people have enjoyed all their life, and that's their own personal vehicle. So you tell me what that portends when it comes to emissions and also oil sales from their neighbors. You can listen to all the other stuff you want, but the fact is that there are too many humans wanting too many things and aren't willing to put anything back. The earth we're living on capital now, as opposed to just the interest. But we've crossed the Rubicon, I think, in terms of preventing global warming. I don't think we can do it anymore. It won't be enough time. When that number, goes. I mean, the glaciers in Greenland are melting faster than any previous computer model predicted they would. And the same thing's happening in other glaciers around the northern hemisphere. So it's pretty sobering.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people just blow it off and say, well, that's just the way it is. Well, I would recommend that you put a for sale sign on that condo in Miami Beach.
Well, that's very exciting. And where do we go from here? There's no place else to go but do what we can with what we have, or we should have. What does that mean to you? What can we do?
What it means to me is that it's a gnawing feeling of total helplessness, that no matter what, where I live in Central Texas, the spirit of climate change denial is strong. These people don't get it. They don't want to get it. They blame it on Yankee propaganda and everything else. It's just they just don't want to accept the truth. Now that's a broad statement to make, but the majority, frankly, don't want to do a thing to draw that back. Politically, in the South, mostly, especially in Texas, the politics are owned and operated by big oil. So, do the math.
Do you foresee the influence and power of big oil in our lifetime diminishing significantly with
Not in our lifetime.
sources of energy?
Not in our lifetime. We're pretty old, and I give them another 20 years.
They're about
Then
to
it'll
shut down
start.
Diablo in California.
Yeah, but that's nuclear, which, and I understand that that's Diablo Canyon. I know, I've driven past that power plant countless times when I lived there. I remember when it came online. The carbon extraction business is going to extract the last drop of oil from the earth before they stop doing it. That's what they're committed to. They all the other stuff they do is very superficial. I mean, they only invest 5 to 10% of their new technology budget into renewable energy. The rest of it is exploration and drilling.
So what's the alternative to the extractive industry?
Yeah, the scientists who are much smarter than I am and get paid a lot more than I do to write their reports and do their research, basically say that we should leave the rest of it in the ground, because if we take any more out, we're really dooming our lifestyle as a species. Doesn't mean it's going to make us extinct, but it's going to move 60% of the people on Earth away from their homes when the climate finishes doing what it's going to do and all the ice is melted off of Greenland and the Arctic Ocean. Antarctica will keep most of its ice, but the rest of it will be gone. The sea level will rise 30 feet.
We better talk about something else. You were talking earlier this afternoon about your gardening, and that was a pleasure to hear you talk.
Yeah.
And your black-eyed peas, and you grow all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I grow a lot of things. I grow great tomatoes and squash and cantaloupe. this year. Jalapenos, cayenne peppers, even grew some artichokes this year for you northern people who like those cool weather crops. So yeah, I even got some sweet potatoes that are coming up, so we're doing
man.
well.
Okay, I'm back on track again. You have a boyfriend, a girlfriend?
Yeah, my wife
or
Elaine
husband?
is my traveling companion and
Yeah.
best friend and confidant, and we enjoy planning. And the planning of our trips is just almost as much fun as going on them.
Huh.
So yeah, I couldn't be happier with that arrangement, and I would just hope that we both can stay healthy for as long as we can.
Yeah, and we established pretty much that you, Donald Trump, are in the same position on the political continuum.
You keep trying to sucker me into that.
Yeah.
No. Donald Trump and I only one of us would get out of the elevator.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about a few people that you look up to or admire again.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a few more that you didn't mention in the first hour.
Yeah. I mentioned Gandhi.
Yeah.
And I mentioned the Roosevelts. The uncle and nephew.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that
mentioned Jimmy Carter.
I mentioned Jimmy Carter, right? And I think I would also say that Harry Truman was one of my political heroes in view of what he inherited and what he endured, and the fact that he didn't suffer fools for a second.
No, he didn't.
And he did not play politics, and the buck did stop with him, and he took the buck up and took care of business, and it was also responsible for integrating the military, among other things. And it's really a pity that the Eisenhowers and the Republicans spurned him so disgracefully when they changed offices.
But he wasn't of that political class, was he?
No, he was not. He was not a college graduate either.
Haberdasher, huh?
Right. He was a haberdasher, and they looked down their nose at him. He was not, he was not an elite, which is, of course, part and parcel with today's Republican Party, too, that they still fancy themselves being the elites.
You're right. Let's move along. A few things we talked about before. You may want to comment about them briefly.
Okay.
In this part of the show, we talked about evil and the roots of evil, and I'm not sure it's worth commenting about that this time. Money being the root of evil.
Yeah, we did a pretty good job on that in the first hour.
And we talked about some
best of times.
People who possible evil people and those who are close. And I think we didn't come to any final conclusion about how much bad a person can do before we can say that this is irredeemable evil.
It's pretty subjective. I mean, it's real. It's a real line, but I think the line is subjective depending on who's the judge at the time. I mean, are you the judge, or am I the judge, or is somebody else the judge of what's evil and who's evil, and how much somebody have to do to be evil? And I answered your question about Obama's decisions about the drone strikes, and I thought fairly succinctly, and it being really a different kettle of fish than the obvious
Holocaust.
abject evil of the Hitler administration, or the Reich, the Third Reich.
What do you think of the Zionists are doing to the Palestinians in that part of the world?
That's brutal. I just don't agree with it.
Does that come up to the level of evil that we can?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think it can match any. I don't think anything can match the Holocaust in terms of evil. To me, it's just another screw up by a bunch of people who have hated each other for 7,000 years, and are still hating each other for 7,000 more. That's all I see. It's just one excuse versus another excuse as to how they manifest that dislike for one another.
Can I ask you another question about the Zionists?
Yeah.
That's a personal thing of mine that's been bothering me for many years. And so-called Israel has ignored the UN for years and years and years. And I'm wondering if the remaining others in the Middle East are going to turn against Jews and Israel and see them all as Zionists rather than loving, kind human beings. What's going to happen to the Middle East in the future?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And if you're understanding the history of the formation of Israel, I think it helps answer that question a lot, because it was a gift from the United Nations to the expatriate Jews that left over from Europe after the Holocaust, the survivors, and they basically gave them Israel.
Why did they do that?
Guilt.
Someone suggested that they did that so that those European countries didn't have to take those Jews back in and deal with them again.
That too, but there's also that cross that the West feels they have to bear for allowing another white, non-Jewish race to perpetrate such horror on them. And I think that there's a strong guilt factor involved. That's just my opinion. But I think Israel has become very paranoid, and I think they have a right to be paranoid. But I also think that they've also overreacted a lot. And I think they could do a better job with the Palestinians than they are doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were there for a while.
Really?
You know, it's in the end, Israel is just another, what's the word I want, ongoing, oozing sore of colonialism.
So let's take a break, Mr. E, one more time before we go and talk about education, the lost brilliance of our American soul. Can we do that? With hello, I'm glad you're staying tuned, because I want to tell you some more about what's going on and talk to my friend here a little more about this second show. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don that you're watching is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about tonight. And we're going to talk about the roots of evil and education and the lost brilliance of our American soul and whatever else that my guest wants to talk about, because whatever he talks about, I love it. So, education, the lost brilliance of our American soul. What does that mean?
It means that we messed up a good thing by cutting the spirit out of education. We stopped funding it. We stopped respecting our educators. And we stopped demanding of our children that they learn.
You mean Americans when you say we?
Yeah, we Americans.
Yeah.
All of those things. So it's not just, you can't, it's a pandemic, if you'll allow that, if you like. And
that's a pretty broad accusation.
Yeah, it is, and I mean it to be, because I've been there and watched it happen. And, you know, in Texas in 2011, They had a budget problem.
Uh-huh.
Okay. The first thing they cut was $6 billion out of the education budget before they cut anything else.
Why did they decide to do that? Doesn't make much sense.
It goes back to the Reagan administration when they tried to eliminate the Department of Education altogether. The Republicans and their marriage to the Milton Friedman School of Economics are about making education for profit.
Mm-hmm.
And they are dedicated to doing that. That is their agenda. The right wing, the religious part of the Republican Party, is trying to subvert real academics by tailoring textbooks to say what they want them to say instead of the truth.
Why would they do that, to tailor
Because
textbooks?
they want to make the children see things their way so that they will vote correctly and put the right people in power.
Profit, money again?
Yeah. You know, it's all about money and power with these guys.
And you're seeing it and experiencing
yeah,
it.
firsthand. This is not, I'm not making this up. You know, I watched it happen and I listened to the parents talk about it. I've had children come up to me as a science teacher and tell me that their minister thinks that all science teachers are the spawns of Satan. I wish I could make it up, but I wish I was making it up, but I'm not. It's the absolute truth.
What role does religion play in this decision?
As much as anything else in Texas, and probably in much of the other parts of the South where the so-called Bible Belt lives. You know, if you look at a map of demographics, which is really bizarre, the states that have the poorest people, the number of poorest people, are the same states that have Republican governors and legislatures. It's right down the line. There's no question about it. The Republican idea of our society is no taxes, no social services, everybody's on their own, and that's it. Teachers remain, after all these years, the lowest paid professional career of any job requiring a college degree, by far. The average salary in the United States for a school teacher is $45,000.
How does that compare with other countries in Europe?
It doesn't. We rank in the 20s. The other nations, first of all, our schools, we only put our kids in school for between 175 and 180 days a year. And that's only 6 hours a day. And that's not including other activities, extracurriculars, and this and that the kids get to do.
What are the kids taught?
How to take tests.
How to take tests.
Yeah.
I've heard that.
Yeah, and you're going to hear it a lot more. In the state of Texas, which is the only one I have any real data for, the state of Texas has had these high stakes mandated tests for No Child Left Behind, created by none other than George W. Bush when he was governor in Texas. And they cost the taxpayer in Texas $100 million a year. And the test results, no change. In fact, compare since these tests started versus like SAT tests, the Texas students have performed the same or even dropped a little. So, by all statistical measures, metrics, these tests have been an abject failure. But it's a political entity. And when politics enters the scene, especially in a Republican state like Texas, it fails.
What are the tests supposed to test for or show? What's the results that?
Yeah. They're supposed to test proficiency in subject matter.
Yeah. And they're not doing that.
No. When I was in school, when I was teaching, the science test that the kids had to pass to graduate for all their years of science in school was 40 questions long, 40. And they only had to answer 60% of them correctly in order to graduate.
60%?
That's correct.
And then when they graduated, they were ready for college.
No, they weren't.
But they were supposed to
But
be.
they're supposed to be. Yeah, that's the whole. In fact, just in the Austin paper recently, there's been some articles about that. You know, everybody's going, oh, well, our kids aren't ready for college. Well, guess what? You didn't prepare them for college, and it has to do with the parents. The parents are working 2 jobs, right? They're trying to keep up with their neighbors who have 2 BMWs in their driveway, so they throw the kid a $100 bill and say, here, go feed your brother and yourself, and have a nice night, because we got to work late. And so the kids are, you know, at sea. Or you get the flip side of that is the parent will come in and harangue the teacher because their kid's not making an A. Well, they didn't earn the A. Well, that doesn't matter because my kid needs to make A's so they can get a scholarship. You know, the unspoken sentence there is because we don't want to pay for it.
How do people get to think that way?
By being under financial stress for a long period of time. It has a lot to do with it. You know, we've talked earlier about the death of the middle class. And these people are middle class people who have their kids in public schools for the most part. And I'm not even talking about the inner city kids. That's a different issue altogether. But just the middle class kids, mostly white kids, their families are struggling. And the whole system is teetering, you know, in that sense because, you know, everybody worships the family unit. Fine, I'm good at that. But when that family unit is failing to do its most important duty, which is prepare your kid to be a high quality citizen in their generation, then we're you know, cutting off both feet, really.
Yeah.
So that's why I say it's our national soul is being threatened because of this accumulation of stress in economics, jobs problems, extreme debt. I mean, there was the Bill Maher's production of Vice. It had a piece about college student debt.
Yeah.
I mean, when somebody said, you know, some expert who knows the real data pipes up and says, oh, yes, our college students are $1 trillion in debt. And they're paying 6% interest, and they want to raise it. The Congress, this Republican Congress, wants to raise the interest rate on student loan. And oh, by the way, if you can't pay your student loan off, you're not allowed to file bankruptcy. They are it's the only entity that can default on their debt and not be allowed to file for Chapter 11. Student loans.
I can't even put my brain around
really.
that.
I copy on that, you know, really. It blows your mind. And yet, you know, our banks are loaning money for 2%. And our government is making profit, 6.5% profit off of our kids who are waiting tables because they can't find a job that pays to their college degree.
How about the media having some responsibility?
The media has been doing that. They've been pounding this for quite a while, but there is no political will. You know what? Our teachers, as I said, get paid lousy wages. The rest of the world sends their kids to school for over 200 days a year. They pay their teachers equivalent salaries to their other professional people, like lawyers and doctors and engineers.
Which they should.
Right. The unions, the teachers' unions are very strong in those countries. The curriculum is very rigorous in those countries. They do not test their kids to death. And they have apprenticeships and workshops for these kids to transition them into either vocational jobs or professional jobs.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you do it. That's how we used to do it. That's how they did it when we were kids. When my high school had a full machine shop. They had, all the vocational shops. My buddy's high school in Detroit, Michigan, had a Ford shop. They could make their own engine blocks. High school. We don't do that anymore. Oh yeah. Well, I was on a rant about the reasons that we're losing our way in educating our kids. We once had the finest education system in the world, but But since the politicians have decided to cut education funding, and especially at the state level, the schools are closing up, or they're raising their tuition rates so high that the middle class kids can't afford them, and so the moms and dads come to me and say, "Hey, you need to get a scholarship." Bobby Jindal, the former governor of your home state of Louisiana,
Yeah.
he took a fine state economy, fed by the oil industry, and he blew it up. He blew it up by implementing Reaganomics and Milton Friedman's supply-side economics. He cut over 60% of the budget to public schools, to the point where some of the smaller state colleges and universities are going to have to close their athletic programs with the new governor because they can't afford it.
Well, they don't need that. They need to have the citizens be tools for industry.
Well, yes, I know. And I really do appreciate your sarcasm on that, because I'm with you. So, all of this is linked. This is not a mystery. This is not who done it. All this stuff is been documented ad nauseum. But what we lack is the political will to go and get to the ballot box and elect the right people. As somebody once said, corporations are not people, and money is
It's not speech.
Speech, right? But that's what's happening. We're allowing corporations to buy our country and how we do business in this country. Whatever happened to the populist politician, the guy who was your milkman, who said, "Hey, you know what? I'd like to represent our neighborhood. My route and everything, and we should all band together and do some things." Whatever happened to him? He doesn't exist anymore, because our politicians have to spend 25 hours a week raising money, 24 days, 365 days a year.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
They don't address issues.
No, except the ones for the donors. When the donors come in with their $1 million checks, then they get their attention.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember the interview that lobbyist who got busted in a scandal? What the heck was his name? Anyway, he went to jail.
Yeah. The one that did go to jail.
Yeah, and he came out of jail, and 60 Minutes interviewed him. And he said, if I had to do over again, I wouldn't allow these politicians to get a bottle of milk as a gratuity from a lobbyist. He said, and what was really funny? He says that they came so cheap. He said my clients said, you can spend this much money, and I started lowballing, and they took it. They were so eager to get their face in the trough, that they didn't even think about negotiating, which tells you that we're electing the wrong people. Absolutely, from the get.
I had a sign that I was wearing some months ago, and it said something about, there's 3 things that need to be changed in our system. We need to have a wealth accumulation limit on the citizenry, mm-hmm. and you can have only up to a certain amount of wealth of income in a year. Mm-hmm. And those kinds of limits, and I don't know how you're going to do that, but we've got to look at some seeming impossible way of reining in the greed.
All you have to do is look at the graphs to underscore that point.
Well, Vern, what are we going to do about that?
Well, I don't know, except that let me say this to begin the answer. 30% of our eligible voters in this country are not registered to vote.
Why is that?
I don't know.
Because you don't think it does any good.
Probably partly true. The other part, I think, is sloth. And there's civil laziness, and they want to remain ignorant. They don't want to be troubled with actually doing something, so they don't. And they're allowed to.
It goes back to my original comment that it's useless to try to do anything about it because you haven't been having any success.
That could be a self-fulfilling prophecy, can it? But if you don't, I mean, if that was the modus operandi all along, then we wouldn't have had the revolution in 1776 either. So the fact remains that until people get off of their butts, put down their Bud Light and their TV remote, and behave like they're a concerned citizen, educate themselves as to what the issues are and who the candidates are, it's not going to change.
And how do they educate themselves? The media has a responsibility.
The media has a responsibility, but they also
on an equal level as everything else, as the legislative and the executive and judicial. That's how powerful the media is nowadays. And there's a responsibility.
Well, the responsibility of the media is directed by corporate America. The corporations, there are 5 corporations who own 95% of the media.
Yeah.
And if they get out of line, they get their little fannies spanked by the donors. Those guys are paying for the advertising too. And if they lose their advertising, they don't have any other alternative. It's almost like did you see the HBO series The Newsroom?
No.
Oh, you need to see that because it personifies that conundrum that the media is in. They want to do good hard news, this fictional news network.
Mm-hmm.
And so they do, and they call them out. They call out the Tea Party, and they call out the Koch brothers on air and say these guys are screwing the nation. And the phone rings in the CEO's office and says, "Hey, you turn this guy off, or we're going to turn our money off." That's how it works. So how's that going to change? That's a really good question. I don't know, Don. But what I fear is that my niece's children are going to be finding themselves as adults in the middle of another revolution. That would be my great concern, that we aren't going to be able to do it rationally because the money and the power has become an establishment to the point where only a revolution is going to flip it.
Say a few more words about this revolution. Is the kind of revolution that Bernie Sanders is talking about?
I wish it were. I wish it would be that way. That would be my first choice, of course. But I fear not. I don't say this to very many people because they usually boo me out of the room.
Mm-hmm.
But and maybe they're right in doing so. But I just don't know how that conundrum is going to be overcome. I've explained it in my books. This is how you do it. But will they happen? I don't know. Will we ever figure out how to go to publicly funded elections? Will we have our election day as a national holiday on a weekend? Will we get rid of these idiotic voter ID laws? Will we do these things that matter? Will we have a petition process instead of this bizarre primary system of picking our candidates for our offices? It's a whole cornucopia of things to do to redirect our ship of state. I just don't know if the people of this country, if we've passed that point of no return or not. I just don't know.
Yeah, well, I think about that from time to time and think about how it will start. Will it be when Trump's supporters decide to rebel if they see that Trump is going to be denied the Republican nomination? Something as dramatic as that, or some natural cataclysm. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be something dramatic, powerful like that, to have a revolution to occur. Yep. But I'm afraid in the Trump situation that those people will, his supporters will react and attack other people that Trump said is your real enemies out there.
They're mindless.
And
they'll just go berserk.
I think about, remember the Watts riot?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I remember the Cleveland riots too.
Burning. Yeah.
I was there. Yeah, I remember those.
And during the Watts riots, I went to a friend's house and Hermosa Beach, Lily White, and hung out there for 3 days. I was
Yeah.
afraid to show my
Yeah.
face, particularly because of how I look,
Mm. Yeah.
because I got it from both sides.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Man.
we got to talk about something else.
Well, we could, yeah, I know, but just to put education, put an explanation point on it. That this country also is sitting on over 300 million guns. 300 million guns. That's what we know about. And now here's an interesting stat. Who do you think owns all the guns? Take a guess.
I'm not going to.
Okay. In the state of Texas, of the people who are licensed to have guns, 26% are women. 7% are African American. Guess who the rest are? White males.
Ah.
What are they afraid of?
I'm not going to sleep tonight because this has been a fun interview so far, but I don't see what the answer is, what the solution is. It's just scary as can be. But I'm obliged to do what I can personally and encourage people who I love and people who will talk with me.
That's all we get to do.
And say that you need to do what you can to have things going in a different direction.
Yeah.
And that means starting right here and be kind to even unkind people. It's very important, very powerful just wearing this sign in public, and people, I get all kinds of reactions, and now and then I get a reaction and it shows in the eyes and the face.
Yeah.
Here's a relief.
Yeah. This interview, I have to admit that I'm tired from my travels today.
Of course.
And I got very dramatic in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
But then maybe that's what it takes sometimes to get some folks who watch this down the road to go, oh, wait a minute, what's this guy doing?
They're going to put you on the no-fly list for sure after they see this in Washington.
You know, whatever. I doubt that.
No,
but
of course.
I'm not fomenting a revolution. I'm against it. What I'm trying to get done is to do what you're doing. You know, one reader at a time to get a clue about, you know, how important it is to participate in your national health. Whatever your choice is, whether it's this, or if it's politics, or if it's education, or anything else, athletics, take your pick. But the thing is that you got to do it. You cannot be a bystander anymore. Maybe that's the good way to finish that.
Not be a bystander, and to be a proactive or to do something, even if it means paying it forward or being kind on a personal level. A brief story, I'm going to toot my horn for a minute here. Occasionally I spontaneously give 10 or 20 bucks to somebody who needs it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going from one shopping center to another in downtown Beaverton here about a couple of months ago. And as I was crossing the pathway going from one area to the other, there was a young fella who was walking toward me, and he was skinny as a rail, and he had this look about his face. And I said, "How are you?" And he looked forlorn, and hardly any words between us. And I says, "Are you know where you're going?" He says, "No, I don't." I said, and a couple more exchanges like that, and then I said, "Are you homeless?" And he said, "Yeah." So I reached in and I got a $20 bill, and he says, "No, I can't take it." No, which said to me a lot about him.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, "It'll make me feel good." And I was sincere with him.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and I meant it, and he took it. And then he reached over and he hugged me and he held on to me.
Yeah.
Somebody cared about him for that moment. And I repeat it now, and I still feel good about it even now. Those kinds of moments, those are individual, personal moments, because I feel good about it.
Yeah.
And I feel good that I'm that way, and I want to be that way more often.
Yeah, I share some of that with when I was teaching, too. I had moments like
you did.
that. Yeah, it was great. It's indescribable, how what a provisional benefit that is to what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just wish it was more like that. I wish we were a kinder and gentler society.
But on an individual level, we can be that way. And then I
Yeah.
think Mr. Director is going to yell at me if I don't stop. Should I stop now when you put up some PSAs, public service announcements? Oh, I got to tell you about the ACLU again. I belonged to the ACLU for, I think, some 40 or 45 years, for a long, long time. And I think they're really wonderful to save our civil liberties. And we got to take our country back by ending corporate personhood, move to amend. We got to amend the Constitution to say that corporations are not persons and money is not speech. And thanks for watching again. This is the second hour. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as we enjoyed it. And please remember, KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you too, and you, and you, and you. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Take care.